Okay, if you'd like to start.
Okay.
Karen?
Good evening. Welcome to the Town of Brighton Conservation Board meeting on March 8th, 2022. I'm Karen Berger, I'm Vice Chair, and I'm standing in for Dennis Adams, our Chair this evening. I just want to welcome our other board members, David Bryden, Paul Johnson, George Smith, and Christine Corrado from the board joining us. Welcome, Paul. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Do we have any public forum? Guess not. You're here for a project, right?
That's right.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of the February 8th meeting. Is there a motion to approve second? Anyone second?
Motion to approve.
All in favor of approving the minutes from our February 8th meeting? Okay, approved unanimously. Thank you. Any communications?
There are no communications.
Okay, no presentation, so we can move on to project review. We have 3P0122, application of 1925 South Clinton for preliminary final site plan approval. So Paul, I'll pass it over to you.
Sure. I don't have a site plan in front of me.
Let me get that up. Paul, give me a quick second here.
Great. Thanks, Rick.
Do you just want to start with the actual site plan and then we can go on to the landscaping plan from there? Or do you want me to go right to the landscaping plan?
Yeah, I think the site plan, and this one you have up, Rick, is a good one. So thank you, Karen, members of the board. Appreciate you taking time to review this application. If I believe many of the same members were present when I presented this phase 2 back in October as we were preparing to go before planning board. The previous plan that you saw is different than what I'm showing here with respect to, we are now only proposing one new building, 190-200 square foot building with drive-through. We scaled the application back and we're not proposing that second building along the frontage. And essentially, in working with the planning board, we had a few workshops. We went back and forth with planning board chair and town staff and presented a bunch of alternatives. And I ultimately presented conceptually in December the plan that you see here, which is the 9,200 square foot building anchored by Starbucks on the north end, their drive-through and associated outdoor seating area, inline tenants, and circulation around the building as you see it. The preferred alternative was the one that we're looking at here. We went and had several workshop sessions relative to how we would address the drive-through queue for Starbucks, trying to minimize conflicts, trying to present the building as best we could to the right-of-way and the streetscape of South Clinton Ave. And this is the preferred alternative that we have tailored the application for planning board to meet with them next week. So the basis of this plan that you see on the overall dashed background is the previously approved preliminary overall site plan. So the restaurant A that is just south of Starbucks is future, not part of this application, and the two-story buildings that are programmed for medical office to the west are also not part of this application, but are consistent with what was approved by planning board at preliminary overall. So this is the update from what you saw back in October. We developed a landscape plan that's consistent with comments we received during the workshop sessions and comments I received at the planning board conceptual review. One of the things that we were proposing that we thought would be a benefit was a garden wall along the eastern boundary of the property. And the planning board really spent some time thinking about that and said, you know, we really would rather see you landscape this in a manner that is going to help screen, you know, lower types of parking lot or car vehicular lights, and you know, allow visibility to the building, allow the tenants to be identified. But they weren't really crazy about the garden wall that we had, so we removed that from the application. This landscape plan is consistent with the types of plants that we were showing at our preliminary overall, and is what we anticipate being reviewed and approved by planning board, subject to any concerns that the conservation board might have.
Paul, can I just interrupt you for a quick second?
Sure.
We saw this back in January under your under the concept also, if you remember. Was the garden wall part of that concept plan, or was that removed out of that plan and you were just showing plantings along the right of way?
I had the garden wall shown along the eastern edge of the right of way, or eastern edge of the drive-through queue and in between the right of way. And planning board comments were, geez, they would prefer not to see that. So that was shown on the December conceptual review plan that I reviewed with planning board. And then when we updated the application for submission in February, I removed it. Or maybe I'm going back, Rick. Maybe it was January conceptual.
Yeah, it was the January
right.
Meeting that went to the board under concept. After
That's
you
right.
had shown the October plan that was denied without prejudice, then we came
That's
back
right.
under concept in January. So I just want to make sure that the January one that this board saw, I don't remember if there was the wall was there or not. Do you remember?
I believe it was, and the consensus was at planning board, they would prefer not to see it. So when we retooled
this is reflecting what you heard at the January meeting from the planning board. That's
correct. That's correct. This plan responds to the comments we received from the concept review with planning board.
Okay.
And if I recall correctly, what we saw didn't have any barrier to against traffic lights coming in the other direction, but you took that into consideration. So maybe that's where the step in between came.
That's right. Yeah, we tried to plant so that the building and the tenant signage is going to be visible, but we can break up the vehicular headlight glare and try to screen vehicles without hiding the building.
You just want to run through it a little bit, what you got shown here, Paul, just to give the board members an idea. A couple of our comments from the concept was the use of native plantings, continue the use of green infrastructure techniques, possibly some street trees to be incorporated in the design. Can you just run through?
Yeah, so I would be trying to fool you if I told you I was a landscape architect and could describe exactly every plant and species that we are proposing, but we are proposing native materials. Costage Engineering prepared the landscape plan. We're showing a mix of street trees, shade trees that are flanking the south end of the building and north entryway, with the street tree entrance along the entrance off of South Clinton. The green infrastructure techniques will continue to be developed in concert with the overall stormwater pollution prevention plan. We are installing bioretention areas along the parking lot, and all of that would drain to the existing stormwater management facility that's been sized for the full build out of the development. So all of the stormwater will be collected and routed to that detention facility for treatment. The plantings again are a mix of trees, deciduous trees, shrubs, and then perennials that would give color and give some texture to the streetscape.
Paul, I
I
think
have a-
one, I'm sorry, go ahead, Karen.
Oh, I just had a question. I see where I see some autumn blaze maples, the AF and the October glory maple, but the other large deciduous trees you have is the honey locust, which is GT, and I'm noticing that none of the large ones are on the street front at this point. I'm wondering where the honey locust trees are planned to be, if you know that.
Karen, I don't.
Okay.
I apologize.
That's
I believe that, you know, the larger trees are inbound in the landscape islands for some shading in the parking areas, and the more modest sized trees are along the streetscape. And, you know, a lot of that is working with our landscape architect to try to minimize how much we're screening the tenant signage from the right of way, which is really paramount to a tenant's viability in these types of facilities.
Paul, I remember from way back, going back a few years when with the original approvals, one of the comments from this board was the installation of the landscaping along the entire South Clinton frontage all at the same time, so that basically it would all grow at the same rate. It looks like you're just basically stopping it at this building pad site. Was there any consideration given to extending it further to the south so that that whole frontage would be installed, maintained, and basically look like one, instead of maybe 2 years later, you're gonna be planning that, and then things are gonna be, you know, pretty noticeable that you got fresh plantings along with more mature plantings?
Sure, and I did look at that, Rick, and, you know, my concern is installing it and then having to come in and then install site electric, gas, other underground utilities, foundations, footings, curbs, etc. I just know that whatever we plant is going to wind up getting destroyed. As best as we could try to protect it, you know, we're likely going to wind up having the construction of that future pad to the south of the 9,200 square foot building. The final configuration of it is yet to be determined. We think we have something in preliminary overall that we're trying to market, but if we can't get that exact footprint, again, I may need to change that. So at this point, what I was proposing was to, as you can see in the hatched area, install lawn and maintain that as lawn along the sidewalk up into the southerly entrance, and then continue that beyond that to the edge of the southern boundary of the property. And then we would stabilize the rest of the site. We'd install the entrance to the senior living facility to the south of us. And a lot of times we wind up putting some type of traffic control or split rail fence so people don't navigate off of it, and just to try to control their route so that they're not aimlessly driving across the site.
talking a little bit about the site itself. You still have some spoil piles there, some topsoil piles. What's the story with those and their removals?
Yeah, so the aggregate that's there was all harvested from the shot rock that we dug up from the site and separated the topsoil and the shot rock. So in developing the site and doing the mass earthwork, we wound up dealing with what ultimately was just deposited there aimlessly back in, when I believe when 590 was constructed. So there was some deep excavations. We processed that, and all of that material that I had our contractor shape is subbase for our next phase, parking areas, drive lanes, et cetera, and then use that to stabilize the rest of the site once we get the utility infrastructure in. This topsoil, ultimately, we don't need all of it that's there. There's much more there than we need. I'm working with our site contractor to dispose of that. We're not in a topsoil season right now, so just hauling it off site to a location has been a challenge. But ultimately, what we believe we'll do is, upon approval, we'd like to install the utility infrastructure, use that aggregate material that's there to create the subbase and the road base for the next phase, use the rest of it to stabilize the site. And then I believe we'll be in the April, May, June timeframe, and the site contractor is targeting locations for topsoil. So we would see majority of that topsoil be exported off-site to final destinations, and then we just retain what we need for future phases in a small pile in the back.
So you're basically saying that by the time you get into construction of this, well into construction of this particular building, you should have the site pretty much cleaned up from all of the stockpiles of aggregate and topsoil.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's just a timing when we got into redoing the site and working with the planning board and getting through all the workshops. We got into the middle of winter, and now it's just an impossible time to try to go out there and do anything beyond creating more of a mess than what's there. So we really need to get into the April, May timeframe to have anything productive happen on site.
Great.
Other questions, comments?
Do you guys want to see the plant list, or just to take a look at it? I can bring it up.
Oh, there we go.
Whoops, I lost it. How did I do that? There we go.
I have a couple comments, actually. The as far as the plantings and as regards something like street trees, arborvitaes and red maples are pretty small as street trees go, which is, yeah, they're native. They don't take up too much space. But one thing I'm a little bit concerned about in general, and this might be a comment to my fellow board members and perhaps the planning board as well, is that this winter, as it's gone on, has really demonstrated how much more room actually needs to be allocated for plants if they're going to survive when you have a big snow year without a ground clearing thaw in the middle of it, because the snow inevitably gets piled into the landscaping, including places where there are trees, and they tend not to survive. So the site, I can see that it's a nice arrangement. It's very tidy in terms of how everything fits in the landscaping plan. On the face of it, looks very good, actually. But I'm questioning how much I know the space that you have plants is not space that you're renting out or using for parking or anything like that, but whether or not enough room is being provided for the plants for them to actually survive. That's the one thing. And then the other thought is that, you know, you say that it would be, you know, expensive and disruptive to put in trees, but then have to like dig some around them perhaps, related to utilities later on, but you have roads and you're presumably going to be digging up sections of those as well, even though they're not completely finished. So I guess I'd like to push back on the idea that, you know, not necessarily doing complete landscaping, but there ought to be, if there are going to be places that seem like they're well sited for some street trees now, to put them in, and then to also look at some things that are a little bit more the scale of the street and what we use, larger trees, not arborvitaes, and which are, you know, rather medium sized, and red maples likewise not being particularly big trees, not shade trees really.
Yeah, so I'm not opposed to doing some larger plantings along the right of way. As I think, what I'm grasping is maybe can we do some trees along the sidewalk edge, look at where our future utility installations are. Can we spot some trees in, allow them to start growing? We prefer the trees to get tall and up high and get some growth to them, rather than you know, plant them very small and have them with a lower canopy. You know, the higher the canopy, the better for us, honestly, as it relates to visibility from the street to signage. The trying to do all of that uniform installation of the shrubs and the perennials, et cetera,
Oh, yeah.
is what I think we would wind up really struggling to salvage, given future site work that's going to happen there.
No, I agree totally. No, and I think that would be my main, as you say, I think that would be my top priority would be to say, to you know, try to figure out some of the places, like, you know, in between where the two buildings are going to be, sort of have a, you know, space there, you know, put some trees in that could be really truly large trees and give them room, and might as well put them in now. And as you're saying, probably leave most of the rest of the landscaping for the end. That makes sense. Yes.
Rick, in this set, is there a overall landscaping plan? I think we developed it for overall and.
Yeah, back when we did the original approval, there was an overall landscaping plan.
Do I show it in this set?
I
thought
don't
I had
think
it.
so. I don't. Overall.
I have it as the page
yeah.
right before.
Yes, there
in
is an
the-
overall for the entire site. Yes, I'm sorry. I was thinking of the original plan. Hang on. This is the original. This is the overall. Let me just get this down a little bit here. So this basically, you know, entire overall site, which is similar to what was originally approved. And I guess that's where I was getting a little confused, Paul, but this is what you show for your overall landscaping plan at this point in time.
Yeah, so
you see some trees, you know, some form of trees in here. These are, I think, the smaller trees that George was alluding to that need a little more height and substance to them. I'm sure there's probably something over in here that could be planted, because it doesn't look like you're going to be disturbing anything over in here, but there could be some pockets that you know you won't be encroaching into. You know, you have to have a certain setback off the road, so perhaps, you know, if your building is going to be here, well, you know where your utilities are going for the most part. We'll try to avoid that. I don't know if there's something you could kind of design where a couple of these street trees could be planted all at the same time, so you do have some uniformity in those.
yeah, we can certainly look at the entranceways. You know, clearly we want traffic to be balanced. The southerly access is going to be the signalized access, so we probably can can go over there and do a little bit more landscape installation along that southerly access point. And then some street trees to run, northerly towards from the southerly access to tie into the landscape theme that we're proposing around this building. So I think that's a valid comment. That's something that we can look at. In worst case scenario, if it's something that I need to tree spade later when we go under construction, I wouldn't prefer to do it, but we've done it before where we'll come in with a tree spade. We'll pluck that tree, put it aside, stabilize it, keep it safe, and then do our utility installation.
Yeah, thank you. I think that would help.
Okay, yeah, that's a good comment.
In this stage of the project, where will the snow go? Just thinking about taking it out of the drive-through. Will it go to the west of the area you're developing?
Yeah, so clearly once we get under full build out, snow removal gets a little more challenging. And in this phase, it would wind up getting pushed to the west. And once we get to full build out, this site overall parks, I believe, at a better than a 5.0 ratio, which allows us room to stockpile and store snow. If we get into a situation where snow winds up limiting available parking or becomes a challenge, then we will haul it from a property management standpoint. We've done that before.
You do that similarly across the street, correct? You use some areas to the back of the parking lot where you have snow mountains?
Yep. Yeah, it's pretty much pushed all against the back of that landscape island that creates a T intersection right on the signalized entrance is where most of the snow is stockpiled there.
And you don't find a parking issue over there when you have those snow mountains?
No, I mean, we're finding that, the general codes that are required for parking from town to town vary from 4.5 to 5 spaces per thousand, and retailers are much more comfortable now in the 3.5 to 4. We obviously need to meet code, and that surplus allows us during winter months to deal with snow storage, which every site has its particular challenges. The reality is if they could get and push snow over to the stormwater detention area, that's where they would most likely try to get it, because then it's just going to melt and make its way out through the storm sewer. It's all eventually getting there anyways. But I don't see that being an issue on this site. We get the huge events and we have to deal with it from a property management standpoint. We do bring loaders in and we'll move it around the site so that it doesn't create a traffic hazard or limit access to any of their tenant spaces.
Are there bike racks at the start proposed?
Yes, there are. We are showing bike racks along this building. I believe the bike rack detail is in there. We also have an outdoor seating area. Starbucks will have a walk-up window that is part of their program.
Not
Like
sure
bike
where
rack.
that bike rack, is it up in this area?
No, they're going to be right along the frontage. We actually, by making some slight changes here, we wound up with about a 20-foot hardscape area in front of this building. So the site plan is going to show where the bike racks are, Rick, and they're right along the frontage of the tenant spaces.
I did see those, and I thank you for finding a way to incorporate them.
Yeah, I think we probably show the double loop style bike rack detail in there, which is what we've traditionally done at our plazas. Yeah, so there's an arrow showing right on the site plan. It calls out for the bike racks.
Other questions or comments? Okay.
All right, just to kind of summarize real quickly, I think it's pretty much, Paul, we're just gonna go back that for the most part, we have no issues with the proposed landscaping. We would like to see a more substantial street tree planted, and then possibly consider planting the street trees further to the south along the frontage so that the street trees can all grow at the same rate. Words to that effect. Am I correct with that, members?
Good.
Great.
Okay.
Well, thank you. Appreciate your
Thank you,
time,
Paul.
everyone.
Thank you,
Sure.
Paul.
Thank
All
you.
right, thanks, Rick. Have a good night, everybody.
You too.
Yep.
Bye.
Okay. Paul, do we have an EMC report?
Yes, we do. The council met on February 16th. As, excuse me, normal for their meetings, there was a guest speaker. This month it was Megan Myers from Healthy Yards, Monroe County. And I think she's also involved with the Color Community Green program, which I'm sure everybody's familiar with. So she started by highlighting some of the local efforts for the Color Community Green, and gave a shout out to Pittsford, Henrietta, Penfield, and of course, Brighton. Part of their strategy, underlying or overriding strategy, I guess, would be biodiversity. It's a pretty strong component of that. And the major goal there is to protect and promote native plants and wildlife. She also mentioned the Healthy Yards Monroe County program that's targeted at trying to reduce the amount of lawn area and replace it with native trees, shrubs, flowers, instead of just grass. And recycling compost, and by leaving it on the lawn rather than having them, raking it up, or having the municipality pick up large amounts of grass and other lawn debris. They also conduct a number of education efforts, largely through lectures and workshops. And I think she said that they had one scheduled for yesterday at the Brighton Library. Am I wrong about that? Rick, do you know if they were
I
there
do
last
not
night?
know.
Okay.
I don't know.
That may have been a library sponsored program, but anyway, they're going around to the towns and villages and drumming up support for these programs. They also have Healthy Yards Monroe County has a website. I don't have the link to it, but I'm sure if you Googled it, you could find it. And that website is apparently under construction. They hope to launch it pretty soon. So that was the kind of a general overview of what they're up to. I was struck a little bit by she ended her presentation with a quote from Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was an early 20th century individual. His quote was, "The ultimate test of a moral society is the kind of world it leaves to its children." And I thought that summed it up pretty well. So that was the sum and substance of the EMC meeting.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Green report?
Actually, if I could comment on that to show
yeah,
the,
sure.
the somewhat insular and circular nature of all of this, related to some of this stuff, Color Brighton Green wants me to give a talk related to native and urban plantings at the library. And looks like it's at this point scheduled for Thursday. May 5th. So I put that out to the rest of you. I have some ideas of what I might want to talk about, but as a member of the Conservation Board, which is how this was extended to me, I would, I'll try to put some stuff together and run it past you for comments and preview prior to that, because I'm sure some of you will have some ideas as well.
That's great. Green report. I guess Mitch is usually our liaison to the SOC, so we don't have anything from him. Staff report.
No report, other than I think you may have all heard that the town has done a offer for the rest of the Faith Temple, Faith Village property. Our Christine, you can kind of help me out here. We're proposing a purchase offer for that, which I think is very exciting.
Is there,
Christine, you're on mute.
My husband really wishes that he had the power to use that mute button there. Yeah, so this afternoon it was publicly announced. The town board has extended an offer to Faith Church for that property. It's the portion that is adjacent to Buckland Park, runs from Westfall down to just before where the stub of Senator Keating Boulevard comes off of Winton, runs all the way along Winton. The only cutout is that corner for Brighton Ambulance and the RG&E facility. So it is not parkland specifically at this point. We're still figuring out what the best use will be. Community is going to be called on for it. I'm sure Conservation Board will have significant opportunity to look at what it could become. But the transaction should be complete in, I think they said about 6 months. So real estate being what it is, it doesn't happen fast. But the opportunity came up and the town thought it would be a good idea to jump on it. Total price is about 1.85 million, which will turn out to be about $6.78 per average $200,000 household in town. So for a couple Starbucks coffees that we don't drink, we get ourselves lots more green space.
What's the
But don't
total?
tell Mr. Colucci that that we won't be going to that Starbucks, so we can pay for our new green space.
Corinne, what is the total acreage of that parcel?
About 45 acres,
45?
give or take, yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
So
and so there aren't any, there's no official thought of what to do with it. It's just we're getting a blank slate and then we're soliciting input.
essentially, yeah. And I think there are a lot of things that will coalesce as potential uses for that space. We've got the Parks and Recreation survey results coming in. We've got the consultants who are looking at what the community wants for a community center for our Parks and Recreation program. We've got probably endless numbers of opportunities for making use of the space while still preserving a significant amount of open space there. So we'll
Great.
see. Stay tuned.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Excellent. Any new business? Old business? No tree council review, looks like.
No trees this month.
Okay.
I
all right.
will say, Carrie, just before we end, that there's probably a good chance that we'll be back in person starting next month. I'll certainly let you know one way or the other. It really depends on what the governor says in next week. But ultimately, I think we are going to be back seeing each other, so live. So
Great. Excellent. And our next. Mhm, David.
Oh, yeah, Karen, was there some news about solar you alluded to?
No, I had just mentioned that I was part of an informal group with
Oh.
that Judy Schwartz convened that was talking with Faith Church about the possibility of leasing that property to bring them some revenue.
Oh, I see.
And so that was the extent of that.
Okay.
Okay. Our next meeting is April 12th, I believe.
April 12th, correct.
Okay, great. Motion to adjourn? Okay. Well, be well, everybody. It's good to see you. I will not be with you in April, but I will see you in May.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Oh, good night.
Good
Night.
night.